Hello everyone, Hyper here, and welcome to the Arms Warrior review. In this video, we'll take a look at all of the abilities and talents which were changed, added, or removed from the game. Towards the end of the video, I will also show you a talent build and show you how it plays on single target versus AoE, as well as give my overall opinion and impressions of the class going into BFA. Keep in mind that this is on the beta, so future builds are subject to change, these things that I will mention. But for now, we are on the newest build on patch 8.0.1, so just keep that in mind when I talk about these abilities. First of all, let's take a look at the talents and abilities that were removed. Battle Cry, which was a cooldown that gave us 100% crit for 5 seconds, was removed from Arms and is still available for Fury and Prot. Cleave, which was a baseline ability, was removed and added as a talent in the level 75 row. Mortal Combo, which increased the max charge of Mortal Strike, was removed as a talent. Also Titanic Might, which basically just buffed our Colossus Smash, was removed. Focus Rage, which was a rage spender to buff our Mortal Strike, was removed and basically built into Overpower. And then Opportunity Strikes, which cause our melee attacks to sometimes hit an extra time and generate a little bit of rage, was also removed from the last talent row. Arms Warrior only received a few major changes to baseline abilities or passives. One of these major changes was to our Mastery. Previously, this buffed our Colossus Smash. Our new Mastery, called Mastery Deep Wounds, makes most of our abilities apply a bleed called Deep Wounds to the target, which deals more damage based on your Mastery. The second major change was to Colossus Smash itself, whose damage increase was buffed from 15% for 8 seconds to 30% for 10 seconds. However, the cooldown of it was increased from 20 seconds to 45 seconds. And then the third change, which is kind of a minor thing, but I thought it was worth mentioning, is Commanding Shout was renamed back to Rallying Cry, which was originally its name. As far as new abilities, Overpower was made baseline. This was previously a talent in Legion, and it was changed to increase the damage of our next Mortal Strike by 20%, stacking up to 2 times. So this is where I mentioned Focus Rage, and this is essentially what Focus Rage did. It buffed our Mortal Strike, and it was able to be stacked up to a number of times. Sweeping Strikes was also made baseline, and it essentially functions the same way, where for 10 seconds our single target ability will hit an additional target for its full damage. We also received a new passive called Seasoned Soldier, which makes our critical auto attacks to generate 30% more rage. And then last, Warrior as a class received Battle Shot, which gives 10% attack power buff to your entire party or raid. Now let's take a look at the talents. In the first row, Dauntless, which used to just give us a 10% discount on our abilities, was replaced with War Machine, which increases rage generation from auto attacks, and killing an enemy grants you instant rage and movement speed for 8 seconds. The middle talent here, which used to be Overpower, was replaced with Sudden Death, and this works like the legendary ring in Legion, giving us execute procs even when the target is above 20% health, making the execute cause 0 rage and deal damage as if it were to consume 40 rage. The third talent here used to be Sweeping Strikes, and this was replaced with Skull Splitter, which is just a rage generating ability that has about a 20-second cooldown, which scales with haste. So the more haste you have, the lower its cooldown. In the second tier, the only major change that you might be able to notice instantly is that Shockwave is gone, and this was replaced with Impending Victory. And this is a melee ability that heals us whenever it deals damage, and its cooldown gets reset whenever you kill an enemy. So this is a self-heal that works very similar to Death Strike on Death Knights. In the tier 3 row, rend duration was changed from 8 seconds to 12 seconds, so nothing major here. Then in the tier 4 row, everything is exactly the same as it was in Legion. Tier 5 row, this is where we start seeing the big changes. And first of all, Fervor of Battle was moved from tier 5 to tier 6, and it was replaced with Collateral Damage. And this is a talent that refunds 20% rage on abilities if they hit a second target when you have Sweeping Strikes active. The center talent here used to be Mortal Combo, and that was replaced with Warbreaker, which essentially just makes our Colossus Smash an AoE ability. The third talent used to be Titanic Might, and this was replaced with Cleave, and this is just the baseline ability that we used to have in Legion made into a talent. For tier 6, again, we see quite a few big changes. The first ability in for the kill was changed to grant double haste whenever you're in execute range. The second talent, Fervor of Battle, which was moved down from tier 5, now increases our whirlwind damage by 10% and also causes your primary targets to be hit by slam. So previously it just increased our whirlwind by a huge amount against our primary target. Focus Rage was removed from the game and replaced with Deadly Calm. And this talent was also changed to now give us 100% rage discount rather than just 75. In tier 7 we only saw one new talent, but anger management was kind of updated to now give us CDR on our Warbreaker, Colossus Smash, Bladestorm, and Deadly Calm instead of just Battle Cry and Bladestorm. The center talent here used to be Opportunity Strikes, and this is replaced with Dreadnought. And this ability increases our max charge of Overpower to 2 and cause it to buff our Mortal Strike by an additional 10%. And then the third talent, Ravager, remains the same as it is in Legion. Now that you know how the talents and abilities work on the Arms Warrior, let's take a look at the most commonly used talent build in BFA Beta. So in the first row we take Sudden Death to give us execute procs even when the target is not in execute range. And especially if you get those within your Colossus Smash window, that is a ton of damage. In the second row, you can either go with Double Time or Stormbolt for raiding, and then for questing and leveling, you probably want to go with Impending Victory for the extra self-healing. In the third row, you want to go with Trauma. Fourth row, doesn't matter too much. Here, it's kind of a choice between more utility, more defensive, or more self-healing. You can pretty much go with any of the three. But for raiding, I would not really take defensive stance since that does reduce your damage dealt. So you can potentially pop it in situations where you need extra mitigation, but usually you're fine taking either Bounding Stride or Second Wind. Then in the fifth row, you want to go with Warbreaker. This is especially nice for AoE situations where you have your Colossus Smash hit everything within 8 yards. And this whole row is based around AoE. Both Collateral Damage and Cleave are AoE talents. And out of the three, I feel like Warbreaker benefits you the most. Then in the tier 6 row, we have Fervor of Battle. And this makes it so even on single target, you will now Whirlwind instead of Slam. And overall, this is just a net gain, whether you're in single target or AoE situations. So you basically never use Slam unless you absolutely do not want to cleave to secondary targets for some reason. In the last row, you want to take Anger Management, and this is an extremely good talent because it gives you CDR on Warbreaker and on Bladestorm. So in AoE, you're able to combo those together more often, and then in single target, you're able to have that burst window with Warbreaker up more often. Let's take a look at how this plays on a single target. So the idea is that you always want to keep your Overpower and your Mortal Strike on cooldown, and any excess rage you get, you spend on Whirlwinds. And then you have Warbreaker, which is a 45-second cooldown, so you want to kind of pull up some rage before it, and then after you Warbreaker, you just want to pump in as much damage as you can. And then once you get to execute, our rotation becomes pretty simple. You pretty much only want to use executes with 40 rage or above, and then you want to overpower on cooldown, and once you overpower twice, then you want to get one Mortal Strike in. Because a Mortal Strike with 2 overpower buffs is about the equivalent of execute, but it does cost you 10 less rage. So it is still efficient to press Mortal Strike even in execute if you have 2 stacks of buff on it. The opener is really simple. You want to charge in, Warbreaker, and then if you get an execute proc, go ahead and use it. Then you want to overpower Mortal Strike, and any excess rage you get, you want to spend into Whirlwinds. But you never really want to dip super low on rage because you want to be able to press Mortal Strike every time it comes off cooldown. Since we are buffing it by Overpower, that is one of our primary damage sources. So we buff it, press it, then we get Overpower procs, and you just spend the procs as you get them. Overall, sometimes it can have periods of downtime where Warrior kind of feels a little bit awkward to play, because you're just standing there auto-attacking, waiting for your rage to regen. But then you have these huge burst windows where you're able to pump out quite a bit of damage. And you just keep this up pretty much. You want to pull up a little bit of rage before you go into your Warbreaker windows. But other than that, as long as you're keeping Mortal Strike on cooldown, Overpower on cooldown, spending your procs as you get them, and then spending your excess rage on Whirlwind, you're good to go. So again, we get Warbreaker, Execute, Overpower, Mortal Strike, and this is like a huge damage window because the target is taking effectively 30% increased damage. Let's take a look at how this same build plays in AoE situations. The idea behind it, especially for burst, is very simple. You would charge in Warbreaker to get that 30% damage increase on all of the targets, and then you Blade Storm. After your Blade Storm is over, then you Sweeping Strikes and you overpower Mortal Strike, but keep in mind that there will be a number of targets, or a target cap, if you will, where you will not be Mortal Striking anymore with Sweeping Strikes up. And you just ignore that. You would press Sweeping Strikes for Overpower because that doesn't cost you any rage, and for also your executes, but overall you would be better off if you just press Whirlwind. So here we'll charge in Warbreaker and then quickly get our Blade Storm in. Right after this we're going to Sweeping Strikes Execute. I'm also going to sneak in a quick Whirlwind so we don't overcap on rage, then Overpower, get another Execute in there while we have Sweeping Strikes up. And from here, we're just going to be Whirlwinding on this many targets whenever we have excess rage. And on this many targets, you also don't want to Mortal Strike if you don't have Sweeping Strikes. If you do have it up, then yes, you should absolutely Mortal Strike. But without it up, I suggest that you should probably just Whirlwind. So again, we have Sweeping Strikes, now we're going to also Mortal Strike, and we just Whirlwind our excess rage. So overall, the playstyle on it is pretty simple, and I assume people are already figuring out kind of where the target cap cutoff is. So there's a few things that you have to mess around with, since with Sweeping Strikes, you will always only be hitting 2 targets, your primary target and a secondary target. Whirlwind, the more targets you have, the more it hits. Same with Warbreaker. So you kind of have to keep that in mind, because on 2 targets, obviously you always want to Sweeping Strike, Mortal Strike, and even up to 4 targets you want to press it, but then there will be a number where you just ignore those abilities and you just press Whirlwind all the time. Now for my overall impression and thoughts on the Arms Warrior. I think it has a few issues, especially with having to just stand still and auto attack to generate more rage. That feels kind of awkward at times, but if you get good RNG, it feels extremely good to play. Another upside is we have very good mobility with having our leap and then double charge if you run double time. And also with leap, if you talent into it, you also gain the movement speed. So we have decent mobility. As far as AoE damage goes, we have really solid burst, where we charge in Warbreaker, Blade Storm, and that does an absolutely bonkers amount of damage. Our sustained AoE is not all that strong, and also when we don't have Blade Storm up, it does fall a little bit behind, but typically you will have Blade Storm up for important pulls if you manage your cooldowns properly. For single target, Arms Warrior is currently doing really well on damage, but keep in mind that that means absolutely nothing. This is the BFA beta. Things are still going to be tuned, other classes buffed, other classes nerfed. So tuning, don't take that into consideration whenever you're choosing a class to play for the next expansion. You should only take into consideration how the class plays, how it feels. And overall, Arms Warrior feels very good to play in most situations. However, like I mentioned before, there's a few issues with it, mainly around rage generation. If our rage generation was a little bit smoother, and because it feels kind of clunky at the moment, but other than that, I really enjoy playing this class. And as for raiding, you always have Fury to fall back on if Arms is not good, but keep in mind that Warriors also give the 10% AP buff to your entire raid. You have Rallying Cry. As far as defensive cooldowns, you only have Die by the Sword really, because Rallying Cry you will most likely have to use as a raid cooldown. So survivability wise, we're still lacking a little bit when it comes to ourselves. We're great at saving other people, but Die by the Sword is not all that great. It's still a 30% DR for 8 seconds, but that is the only thing we really have, and it's on a long cooldown. We don't really have anything short. We still have Berserking Rage, which removes Fear Saps, Incaps, things like that, so that's nice to have for PvP. One major issue with this class in Legion was the RNG on your class's smash. Whenever you got procs and you got resets, you were doing insane damage. And then whenever you weren't getting resets on your class's smash, you were just sitting there waiting for it to come off cooldown and you were doing basically no damage. So with the removal of that and with the addition of our anger management to affect Warbreaker and class's smash, I really think that it plays a lot smoother and it's way less RNG reliant in this expansion. Now, as far as questing and soloing content, this class is still really good if you take Impending Victory, because as long as you're able to kill one target, you will just get chain resets, and you have insane burst AoE damage, so for questing you're able to pull large packs of mobs, just burst them down quickly and move on to the next one. For soloing extended things like elites, maybe it's not the best class because you don't have sustained self-healing, but outside of that, I think Warrior is really solid. With all the utility and damage it does, Warrior still seems like it will be a top contender for melee spots in raids, so that's exciting to see going to the next expansion. Thank you so much for watching, and I really hope this video helped you if you're planning on playing Warrior going into BFA, and if not, you were just curious about the class, I hope this gave you the proper information. Again, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and sub to the channel. I'll see you on the next one.